I crashed with Benjamin 2 nights ago. Fiona dropped this bomb casually, one arm hooked through mine while her free hand lazily flicked through clothes on the mall racks. Behind her chill delivery, my fragile heart nearly flatlined. Fiona, my friend. Benjamin, the CEO of our company, my boss's boss. I forced myself to keep it together, but my mind automatically flashed back to last weekend's company celebration. She'd gotten completely hammered and collapsed right at Benjamin's table. The truth hit me like a freight train. How did I miss all the signs?
I should have seen it coming that night.
Chapter 1. This is Fiona we're talking about. She's not an employee at our company, nor someone who gets wasted easily. A legendary social butterfly, she never loses her composure at dinner parties. Yet that night she not only passed out but later texted me in perfect sentences saying not to wait up since she had her own plans. Meanwhile, my evening was totally boring. Apart from nervously lifting my glass to toast the big bosses from across the room, I spent the night hiding in a corner stuffing my face. By the end, my belt was fighting for survival. Now Fiona stood in front of me, her hands grabbing clothes like she was shopping for groceries, piling a mountain of them at checkout. The POS machine beeped as it printed receipts, a sound as sharp as her laugh. She flashed a black card my way with a mischievous smirk. Benjamin's card. Might as well use it. Looking back, I realized the clues were there from the start. The first time I showed her a photo from our company's annual party, she zeroed in on Benjamin. She started asking more about my job, even digging up all kinds of info about him online. Elite university graduate, workaholic, zero public scandals, a unicorn among successful men. As Benjamin's assistant's assistant, I barely ever got within 10 feet of him. Yet in just one night, a company party no less, Fiona had already bagged her trophy. That's Fiona for you. A top-tier flirt standing proudly at the peak of the dating food chain. Just as we walked out of the mall, shopping bags in hand, she suddenly froze. I followed her gaze to the massive LED screen outside broadcasting a live fashion show from our company. The camera swept across backstage, briefly catching Benjamin. He was facing away, leaning slightly forward to press a gentle kiss on the exposed shoulder blades of a model, a breathtakingly elegant scene. The model was Ting Ching, Benjamin's official girlfriend. Her posture was always perfect, radiating grace and class. She left quite an impression on me. Fiona stood motionless, eyes glued to the screen. A woman like her must feel so damn proud, she murmured, fingers tightening on my arm. Her hand trembled slightly, and a predatory glint flashed in her narrowed eyes. Her lips curled up, mixed with spite and excitement. They won't last. I sighed. That's Fiona for you. Did she actually like Benjamin? Probably not. What she truly loved was the thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of proving her charm by bringing others to their knees.
She'd always been this way.
Since we were young, she taught me what it meant to be a top-tier flirt. She could humble herself to please others, but her ultimate goal was pleasing herself. To be honest, my intentions weren't pure from the beginning either. When I first showed her Benjamin, it was a calculated distraction. If her attention was on others, I figured I'd be safe. But now, timing perfect, I decided to come clean. By the way, I started cautiously. I'm seeing someone. Planning to get married this year. What? Fiona's gaze snapped back to me, eyes wide with shock. Who?
Since when?
Why didn't I know about this? Seeing my guilty smile, she immediately got it. Narrowing her eyes, she gritted her teeth. Unbelievable. You actually kept this from me. You've got some nerve. With an annoyed huff, Fiona lunged, tickling my sides mercilessly. No excuses. My birthday's next month. Bring him. I need to check him out myself. Shrieking, I tried to fight her off, laughing uncontrollably as I promised. Only then did she back off, her anger melting into a satisfied grin. Chapter 2. With Fiona's birthday looming, I curled up on the couch biting my nails while scrolling through possible gift options for her. My days were already maxed out picking gifts for work, and now I had to brainstorm again for this queen. The whole thing was draining me. Just then my phone lit up. Your package has been rejected and is being returned to sender. That made 7 straight rejections. Jewelry, flowers, designer bags, shoes. Every single attempt had crashed and burned. I snapped a screenshot and sent it to Assistant Jung, then glanced over at Marco. He was at the dining table, completely absorbed in his law firm work. Having built everything from nothing in the city, he was a grinder and honestly pretty amazing. I kept looking back and forth between him and my phone. Finally, he shut his laptop, came over to sit beside me, and laughed. Just spit it out. I mumbled, resting my head on his shoulder, speaking quick and soft. I have this really good friend I want you to meet. Marco nodded, totally unfazed. I know. Fiona, right? Shifting position, he rested his head against mine and added with a chuckle. About time. You talk about her so much I'm dying to meet her. With that, he wrapped an arm around my waist as we settled into the couch to watch TV together. I always loved cuddling like this.
We did it all the time.
The TV was showing entertainment gossip. After the Star Awards red carpet, reporters swarmed around Ting Ching, microphones shoved in her face from every angle, bombarding her with questions about rumors of her boyfriend being caught with some mystery woman in an underground garage. On screen, she stood in the freezing cold wearing a see-through backless gown that hugged her curves. The wind plastered her styled bangs to her forehead, and surrounded by reporters bundled in thick winter coats, she looked exposed and out of place. The segment cut to paparazzi footage. The shaky, blurry video was shot from far away, making faces barely recognizable. But even with the terrible quality, I knew immediately it was Fiona. Her figure was unmistakable, a bombshell whose thighs, when wrapped in stockings, left the subtlest trace of soft flesh at the edges, a detail so sexy it could make anyone's pulse race. My mind flashed back to what she'd told me after we split up that day at the mall. Even if the guy's a saint, Ting Ching's body is too frigid for him, not to mention her personality. A slight smile had played on her lips. Prime beef might be the best cut, but desire is always most satisfying when it's raw and unfiltered. I was stunned. Fiona's grasp of human desire was leagues beyond me. She wielded her sex appeal effortlessly while I doubted I'd ever crack such mysteries in my lifetime. More than that, she was fearless, decisive, and went all in when she wanted something. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Assistant Jung replying. My eyes stayed glued to the TV, anxiously waiting for the next twist in the story. After a brief pause, Ting Ching, her face icy and voice clipped, stated she knew nothing about the incident and they had already broken up. With that, she stormed off, leaving the camera lingering on her retreating figure, still straight-backed, elegant and proud, but tinged with a hint of loneliness that tugged at your heart. The broadcast switched to other celebrity gossip, snapping me out of my trance. I glanced at my phone. The message was brief, just one line. Confirmed with Mr. Chin, no further gifts are necessary. I was floored. This battle seemed won before the first shot was even fired. It was breathtaking, really. Fiona, oh Fiona. She had a knack for finding that loose thread in a man's heart and unraveling him completely. It was almost too easy for her. No wonder she never stopped casting her net year after year. Marco's steady breathing tickled my hair. He'd closed his eyes and started dozing. Quietly, I shifted to get a better look at him. My eyes traced his smooth forehead, straight nose, and full lips, finally resting on the little dip at the base of his collarbone. Marco was undeniably successful and hot. Though he might not be in Benjamin's league, he was more than enough for me. Maybe from hanging around Fiona so long, I'd picked up a trick or two, and with some luck, I'd stumbled into a relationship with Marco. I knew my limits. Marco was probably the best I could hope for if I reached high enough. But was introducing him to Fiona really smart? Would things play out like I hoped? Anxiety coiled in my chest. But no one had answers for me. All I could do was snuggle closer to Marco, burying my worries deep in his warm embrace. Chapter 3. Fiona picked a fancy Cantonese restaurant for her birthday dinner. Getting ready, I deliberately swapped all of Marco's usual toiletries and cologne with ones that matched my own scent. They say when a man gets used to a certain smell, his brain subconsciously links it with love. This little hack was something Fiona taught me back in college. She'd been sprawled on my narrow dorm bed, legs crossed, painting her nails while enthusiastically explaining her latest discovery. People say, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach, but that's just part of it. If you want him hooked long-term, you need to engage all his senses. Taste, sight, sound, smell, they're all fair game for manipulation. Fiona was a natural at this stuff. So before dinner, I'd strongly pushed her to bring her boyfriend too, claiming it would make things less awkward for Marco. Of course, the real reason, which we both understood, was that I wanted extra insurance. Growing up, I'd always been overshadowed by her. Never as stunning or as clever. I was her only female friend not because she needed one, but because I posed no threat. I'd always been the perfect sidekick to her star role. But this time, I was determined to protect my slice of happiness. What I hadn't counted on was Benjamin actually showing up. He arrived early, having picked up Fiona himself. When he walked in, he politely shook hands with both me and Marco. His grip was firm and dry, radiating quiet confidence. Fiona barely brushed Marco's fingertips before letting go, flashing him a bright smile. "I've heard so much about you. We're practically family." As they exchanged pleasantries, I snuck a glance at Benjamin. It was surreal. Until now, I'd only ever seen him from afar during company-wide meetings. Tonight, he wore a casual hoodie with light-wash jeans. His hair, usually slicked back, fell loosely over his forehead, making him look like just another handsome guy. The fact that I was sitting at the same table as him felt unreal. A line between employee and boss had been crossed, all thanks to Fiona. Benjamin was perfectly polite, pouring water for everyone before handing Fiona the menu to order. I was sure Fiona had caught the matching scent Marco and I wore. When she hid behind the large menu, she shot me a teasing look, silently mouthing, "Relax." She was the perfect villain, dangerous yet irresistible. My face burned as I quickly looked down, pretending to focus on my water glass. Marco, the smooth-talking lawyer, he was easily held his own in the conversation. Benjamin, no surprise, matched him effortlessly. Would Fiona be into Marco? I couldn't help wondering. He was definitely her type, his looks, his vibe, even his success. The dinner stretched almost 3 hours, the mood lively and comfortable with zero awkward silences. Benjamin picked up the tab at the end. As we were leaving, Fiona stood at the restaurant entrance waving goodbye to Marco and me. "Keep it up, okay?" she said to Marco with a grin, her hand playfully reaching out as if to touch his shoulder. My heart skipped. Without missing a beat, I stepped between them, lightly catching her raised hand before it could reach him. She looked slightly startled. Just then, Benjamin returned from paying. Fiona quickly recovered, leaning into him and wrapping her arms around his waist in a lazy, affectionate move. All evening she'd maintained perfect balance, chatting with Marco just enough to be polite but never crossing lines. Yet despite her flawless behavior, an unexplainable unease crept into my heart. Maybe because I knew her too well. As we walked away, I pulled out a compact to fix my lipstick. In the mirror's reflection, I saw them still standing by the restaurant entrance, locked in a sweet embrace. But Fiona's face rested on Benjamin's shoulder, her eyes fixed on Marco and me, a thoughtful expression clouding her gaze. Would everything work out like I hoped? On the way home, I couldn't shake my anxiety. Marco noticed my distraction. As soon as we got inside, he turned to face me, one arm wrapping around my shoulders while his other hand pressed firmly on my lower back, pulling me close. "What's on your mind?" he murmured, his warm lips tracing the curve of my jaw down to my ear. Through our thin clothes, I felt the heat from his chest. "Do you think I'm not good enough for you?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "You're so much better than me." Marco froze briefly before softly reassuring me, "Don't worry. Women like that aren't my type." My heart sank. He kissed my neck, the tender gesture slowly deepening as his lips moved down to my collarbone. I clung to him desperately, trying to pour all my feelings into my response. Both Fiona and Marco had told me to relax tonight. But I was defenseless, no match for Fiona. My chest tightened as clouds of doubt gathered, casting a shadow that wouldn't lift. Chapter 4. I'm not sure if it's just paranoia, but since that dinner, it feels like Marco's been working late more often. His job has always been demanding, the pressure intense. But now my insecurity has me spiraling, second-guessing every little thing. I've started checking Marco's shirts for stray hairs when he takes them off and burying my face in his laundry, inhaling deeply to catch any strange perfumes. Worse, I've begun asking subtle, probing questions about where he's been. At first Marco was patient, but gradually his forehead creased and his answers got short. He probably still loves me, but he definitely doesn't like me as much as before. I'm terrified. I know these actions are suffocating, yet I can't stop. Every time Marco comes home late, I'm on edge, caught between waiting and despair. I'm pushing him away. I know this isn't healthy, but I can't change it. Sometimes I look out the window and spot Marco's car parked downstairs. He's sitting there smoking, the glow of his cigarette flickering in the darkness, reluctant to come upstairs. Meanwhile, Fiona still asks me out occasionally. We shop, get our nails done. Everything charged to Benjamin's card. Benjamin sometimes calls during these outings. Fiona, either mid-shopping spree or watching her nails being painted with precision, usually answers with vague, disinterested mumbles. Her attention is clearly elsewhere. Found a new target? I ask her. She's casually picking a design from the nail art samples, her eyes flicking toward me with a sly smile. You guess, she says, her voice light and playful, laced with charm and mischief. I both love and hate her for it. I tell myself there's no way she'd stoop low enough to go after her friend's fiancé, not when Marco and I are getting married this year. Yet the unease lingers. Fiona's interests are fleeting, her attention quick to come and go. Loving someone like Fiona is a losing game. No matter how exceptional the man, he ends up wrapped around her finger. Her heart isn't moved by love, only the thrill of conquest. And in the game of love, whoever falls first always loses. The clock hit 1:30 a.m. The soft click of the front door reached my ears, and I jumped up, blurting out, "Where have you been?" Marco, his navy suit jacket slung over one arm, looked exhausted. He glanced at me, his brow slightly furrowed. "Had drinks with a client. Don't start this again. I've got enough stress already." The concern I'd been ready to voice instantly died in my throat. I hesitated, realizing how aggressive I'd sounded. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, regret weighing heavy in my chest. I walked over quickly, taking his jacket from his hands. Marco headed straight to the bathroom to shower. He was always drained, and it had been forever since we'd shared any real intimacy. As I brushed dust off his jacket before hanging it up, something caught my eye. I froze. Carefully, I turned over the narrow lapel and pulled out a single strand of long chestnut brown hair. My mind went blank. That color was unmistakable. Just days ago, Fiona had sent me a selfie bragging about her new hair color and how flattering it was. She'd even invited me to get the same shade. Why had she been so insistent? A chill ran through me as the pieces clicked. Maybe if we had the same color hair, any stray strands would go unnoticed. Fiona was still Fiona. She hadn't changed at all. And I was both devastated and unsurprised. Chapter 5. The next few days passed in a blur. I was distracted at work, my thoughts scattered. Even when Benjamin approached my desk, I didn't notice until he tapped lightly on the edge. "Has Fiona been to see you recently?" he asked, his expression serious. "She seems off these past few days. Is she upset?" I looked up at him blankly. He stood there in a custom suit, hair perfectly styled. Gone was the casual, youthful image from the dinner. He was once again my boss's boss, the company's top executive. Yet something about him felt different. Maybe it was the fact that he now came to me because I was Fiona's friend. We were both unlucky losers in love. I shook my head. Benjamin sighed softly and turned to leave, but I reached out and caught the hem of his jacket. The words tumbled out, soft yet deafening. "Want to grab a drink later?" I was wasted. Completely wasted. My mouth wouldn't stop running as I poured out every thought, every grievance. Men were infuriating. Friendship was bullshit. I knew why deep down. Marco was dedicated and hardworking both in his career and in love. But maybe he felt I wasn't enough, especially with someone like Fiona around. I repeated the same complaints over and over, my voice slurred with alcohol. Benjamin finally had enough and reached out to steady me. And then, I turned my head and vomited all over the ground. The last shred of clarity I had went into making sure I didn't puke on his shoes. After a moment of hesitation, Benjamin hoisted my drunk, miserable self over his shoulder and flagged down a taxi. He didn't know where I lived, so he directed the driver to the nearest hotel. Along the way, he even bought a bottle of water for me to rinse my mouth. Stumbling into the hotel lobby, I nearly tripped and fell into him, the two of us a tangled mess. The gleaming golden doors of the hotel spun in slow motion, the brilliant lights stinging my dazed eyes, bringing a sliver of clarity. "Do you hate me?" I asked. Fate is funny. Benjamin, once a figure so distant, now stood here patiently enduring my drunken rambling. None of this would have happened without Fiona. In the cold night air, I watched as he gently shook his head. Tears welled in my eyes, slipping free despite my efforts to hold them back. "Marco," I whispered, tilting my head upward, lips trembling like ripe cherries waiting to be picked. I called the wrong name. I was too scared to say his name, afraid it would make everything irreparable. The wind bit at my skin, a crescent moon hanging in the dark sky. I stood frozen, waiting. And finally, a kiss. Light, fleeting, like a dragonfly skimming water's surface. It wasn't a lover's kiss. It was a kiss between friends, almost polite in nature. My eyelashes fluttered, and the tears fell. Chapter 6. My pain was a secret only Benjamin knew. I didn't tell Marco. I didn't tell Fiona. Men with the last name Shin were destined to be my downfall. Sometimes Benjamin and I would grab a quiet drink together, but it was always just as friends. He was incredible, a distant, untouchable star, yet grounded in his integrity. A workaholic with few relationships in his past. Ting Ching had exhausted him, while Fiona left him confused. Still, he was trying, genuinely making an effort to make his relationship work. These little truths were our shared secrets, and my heart soared for it. Once a god, Benjamin had now fallen halfway to earth, close enough that with some effort I could reach him. Yet when it came to my hints about Fiona, he refused to believe me, or maybe pretended not to. I wasn't rushing. If he wouldn't make a move, neither would I. Truth had a way of surfacing eventually. For now, everything seemed peaceful, as if no one had taken a wrong turn. The days flowed by, spring melted into summer, and August arrived. When Fiona called to tell me she'd be spending Valentine's Day festival with Benjamin, I laughed and said, "Congratulations." Later, Marco finally texted me. He'd be working late again. I sighed deeply. No surprises there. I called him, my voice gentle. "Take care of yourself. I'll be waiting at home." After hanging up, I sat alone on the couch staring at the empty house. The only sound was the ticking clock marking seconds as they passed. On this beautiful evening, who would you choose to spend it with? The star in the sky or the dirty thrill of the forbidden on the ground? Closing my eyes, I started to speculate. I'd played this guessing game countless times before, like a lurking spider observing and calculating from the shadows. But tonight, a strange thought bubbled up in my mind. It grew louder until it echoed like a massive bell reverberating through me. I could almost hear destiny calling. Tonight. Now. I nearly burst out laughing. I had studied him long enough. My patience was about to pay off. I slipped into my hottest dress, applied flawless makeup, and carefully selected an unopened bottle of expensive wine from the cabinet. On this night made for lovers, I drove back to the office, heart racing, and knocked on my boss's door. Benjamin, the workaholic, was exactly where I expected him to be. Moments later, the door opened. I looked up at his tired face and smiled. "Isn't Fiona with you? It's Valentine's Day." He sighed softly, saying nothing. Perhaps he too was waiting for an answer, for certainty. Eventually he gave in. "What do you want?" I held up my phone, showing him a blinking green dot on the map. I think I know where she is. Want to come with me to find her? I had set Marco's phone to share his location without him knowing. The map confirmed he was at his office building, but I had a hunch he wasn't alone. Everything went smoothly, just like everything else had so far. I signed in for a visitor's pass at the front desk. The receptionist knew me, so no problems there. As Benjamin and I approached the office door, the unmistakable sounds of something intimate reached my ears. The voices, both male and female, were painfully familiar. What lay beyond that door? I imagined Marco fully dressed while she would be totally naked except for panties dangling from her raised foot. After all, lust is always rawest at its most basic. She must have been riding high on her victory at that exact moment. Do you still want to go in? I asked Benjamin, holding up the bottle of wine. Fiona was gorgeous, far more than I could ever hope to be. She had the power to bring men like Benjamin down from their pedestals. But without her knowing, I had already delivered the final blow. In her ignorance, I had slammed the gavel on her trial, crushing any lingering feelings or confusion Benjamin might have had for her. I don't need to, he said darkly, turning and walking away. To ensure they'd have a proper celebration afterward, I carefully placed the bottle of wine on the desk nearest Marco's office door. I could barely contain my excitement thinking about their reaction. I had waited so long for this. I had gone to such lengths for Benjamin. With one last glance back, I followed him down to the underground garage. In the car, I closed the door and pressed the privacy screen. I had no intention of being caught on camera. Benjamin was crying.
My star.
My heart was breaking for him. Leaning over, I kissed away the tears on his face. His beautiful eyes met mine, focused only on me. I will never betray you, I said. He was so close now, his shattered heart within reach. Who is it that said lust is rawest when it's most basic? Leaning in, I unzipped Benjamin's pants. This time, he didn't refuse. Surpassing the master, I proved myself to be an excellent student. On this beautiful, tender Valentine's evening, the rewards belonged only to those who came prepared. Chapter 7. What followed was surprisingly simple, everything falling perfectly into place. I wasn't about to waste this opportunity. Without hesitation, I pushed forward and Benjamin and I filed for our marriage certificate early on. We signed a prenup. Whoever cheats leaves with nothing. Both Benjamin and I needed this kind of security. This relationship had cost me too much effort. It demanded a definitive conclusion. Fiona, meanwhile, remained single. She still bounced from man to man, savoring the rush of her conquests. Was she still chasing victory? I didn't know. And honestly, I no longer cared. Scrolling coldly through her social media updates, I smirked, then turned off my phone. Since that night, Marco had apparently figured something out. He deleted all my contact info. I knew it wasn't guilt, it was embarrassment. As for Fiona, I guess Benjamin had confronted her privately. Neither of them reached out to me again. I didn't block Fiona, though. Sometimes I still found entertainment in her posts. After all, she had taught me so much. For that, I was grateful. Inside the room was warm, the heater humming softly. Outside, the biting wind seemed to lose its edge against the coziness within. The afterglow of intimacy still lingered in the air. Turning to my side, I studied Benjamin's sleeping face. His breathing was steady, his expression peaceful and satisfied. My eyes devoured every detail, his smooth forehead, straight nose, full lips, and finally the gentle hollow at the base of his collarbone. He was no longer my boss's boss, no longer the company's unreachable star. From the moment I first saw this man, I knew I wasn't supposed to have him, but I wanted him desperately. I carefully traced my fingers along his brow, then slid them to the back of his head, feeling the soft, slightly damp strands of his hair against my palm. A wave of satisfaction surged through me, so intense it was almost overwhelming. Did I love Marco? Maybe a little. But he was too ordinary, too easy to reach.
I've always craved stars from the sky.
Benjamin, with his successful career and gorgeous girlfriend, was once untouchable. I was just an assistant's assistant, not even worthy of brushing against his coat. I couldn't win. A wall, invisible yet real, had always stood between us. My life was meant to stay in the shadows, a speck of dust gazing up at the stars from far below. In the game of love, whoever falls first always loses. But fortunately, I had an exceptional hunter by my side. I'd always been steps behind Fiona, never as stunning or as clever. But she was bold and competitive, drawn to everything just beyond her reach. Marco was exactly her type. So I hid Marco carefully, pretending he was precious. Pretending I had something worth protecting until I accidentally let her discover it. I had to let her see it but not touch it. To make her itch with curiosity and burn with jealousy. Fiona couldn't help herself. How could she allow a timid, awkward supporting character like me to possess something she hadn't yet explored? I understood my hunter well. And though I couldn't be a hunter, I could be a fisherman, gathering the prey she wounded, pulling it ashore, and nursing it back to health. Benjamin was my fallen star. Perhaps sensing my gaze on him, Benjamin stirred in his sleep, his eyelids fluttering open briefly before closing again, murmuring sleepily, "Not sleeping." "Sleeping," I replied softly, tucking myself under the blanket and wrapping my arms gently around his head.
Sleep now.
Sleep, my star. The night skies sparkled with stars, and soft moonlight streamed through the window, casting a gentle glow over the pale sheets. Smiling, I closed my eyes. Tonight would be a good night's sleep.